Carry on. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. How's everyone today? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. If anybody has Dr. Bray's number, you can maybe just message him, tell him that his volume must be off. Because somebody else sent a message saying that they can hear on the chat. So, excuse me? Yes, there is. I can. Okay. There is a whiteboard function. Yes, somebody else sent the message, but I think he still mentioned after that. Okay. Bismillah. We continued. We did a hadith last week on what happened to it? We did a hadith last week on Zuhud. That was hadith number
51, Maulana.
I think this disappear now. Give me 1 second. Excuse me, yeah. Well, I was just there were just some things that I wanted to arrange in my. I was not getting over to the side. Let's see. That you will. I was just deciding what to do and how to arrange it and stuff like that. So we did the mansubat. We did the okay, we're going to go through marfu'at again as a recap. We did the mansubat. What remains is the majrurat and the tawabi'. Right? Majrurat are those things that are in halatul jar. Harful jar, ism majrur, and mudaf and mudafun ilayh. But by and large, we know the rules of those things. There's just some exceptions that we might learn over there, and different functions for the mudaf, mudaf ilayh. So, for example, there are instances of a mudaf, mudaf ilayh where the al appears on the mudaf. There's places where the noon of the due or the plural remains. So certain exceptions like that. And then the tawabi' are the followers. So a word or functions that don't get fulfilled by a specific hal, but they follow the hal of another word. So for example, a sifa, what we might call a na'at, badal. You know the difference? You know what's badal? Yeah, so I mean, a badal is like a replacement. You could omit the one from the sentence, and the sentence will still make sense, have the same meaning because of the presence of another word. But then there's some additions to that, like you get different types of badal. Badal ba'd, for example, where, like for example, Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ. So what was revealed to the two angels. Then Allah mentions Harut and Marut. Harut and Marut are the two angels. But you can't say Harut is badal for Malakain, because it's only one of the two angels. So that's like badal ba'd, for example. So there's some rules about that. Naat, badal, tawqeed, when things are there for emphasis, and atf. And then there's different types of atf. Like when things are added to, like you can say al-kitabu wal-qirtasu wal-qalamu, like that. You can add like that. But then there's different words as well, like fa and thumma. Those are all different forms of atf. They have different usages and different meanings. So there's something to be said about those things over there. Right? So we will continue with that, inshallah.
Sorry, Mama, I just had a quick question.
Yes.
Before doing the read it, will we ever help work on conditional sentences? Like there's a lot of if and should and that. Are there rules for that then? No.
Yes, of course, there's rules for conditional sentences.
Oh,
okay, those don't. You see, the conditional sentences more pertain to particles that have an effect on verbs. Right, so it's not like, for example, you have a harfu shart, or like a in, for example, or a law, and that affects a verb that comes after it in some way. So, for example, if I use a past tense verb, then it doesn't affect it, because the past tense verbs, they don't have has. But if a present tense verb comes after that harfu shart, then it does affect it. Usually it might be in jazm, for example. So those don't fall like neatly into the categories of raf, nas, jar, tabi'. Right?
Okay.
But inshallah, we can look at some of the huruf then afterwards.
Okay.
We look at some of the huruf. Look, there's like tons of nahu to learn. I think the general focus, or our focus, was always on like looking and learning the language from the perspective of what has the most utility, right? Specifically utility in relation to understanding the Quran. Obviously, learning more Arabic will perhaps add more depth to your Quranic understanding. But there's also things in Arabic that don't get used in the Quran, for example. Like certain huruf nida, like is a harf nida. Like if I want to call somebody that's near, then I can say like, if I want to, the one that I always take from poetry is Fatima. Fatima mahlan, but it means like, it's a harf nida. But it's lil munada al qareeb, but it doesn't appear in the Quran. So I mean, obviously, in our course, we're not focused on that, because we're not doing just Arabic for the sake of Arabic. So, inshallah, like what has relevance, to our Quranic study, we can always add it. We like adding as we're going along also, because we're not working from a single Arabic text. It's not like we're taking the Ajurumiyya and then we're going through the, which is like one of the classic works people generally use, or the Ajurumiyya and the Tatimatul Ajurumiyya. We're also selecting what is pertinent to our Quranic study. Yeah. Okay. So inshallah we'll continue with that soon. I didn't intend to do it today, but I didn't manage to type up a note on the thing that I wanted to do. So, or maybe next week. But the hadith. So on last week's hadith, the hadith was about zuhud, right? And how do you get the love of Allah? Or rather, the Sahabi asked, oh Rasulullah, tell me about to an action that if I do it, Allah will love me and the people will love me. Rasulullah told him, be abstinent of what the people have, the people will love you. And be abstinent in the dunya, then Allah will love you. Right? So the focus was on zuhud. And like, what is zuhud? So some of the scholars of like tazkiyah, tasawwuf, whatever you want to call it, right? They give a definition of zuhud and they say that is khalwul qalbi amma khalathu al-yad. Khalwul qalbi amma khalathu al-yad. So removing from your heart those things that are not in your hand. That's one definition. Right? Removing from your heart that which is not in your hand. And I think in relation to the dunya. How's that? Like we always say, you can have the dunya in your hand, not in your heart. But this is looking from a slightly different perspective on this point. It's removing from your heart that's not what's not in your hand. So for example, if there's something that I have, then yes, I can like the thing. But if there's something that's not in my hand of the dunya, then I strive to remove it from heart. I'm not always hankering after dunya. So it's looking at it from the perspective of removing from your heart everything that you don't have in your hand. So for example, a person may, like say a male sees a female. He finds her attractive. But he knows, like, and look, there's a majazi thing here. We don't own each other. People don't own each other. Males don't own females, husbands don't own wives, none of that stuff. But if he knows that's not within the reach of his hand, then he removes it from his heart. He doesn't become like Majnoon, running after Layla. Or be filled with anxiety or whatever because of one. So that's one meaning of zuhud. Yes, that would be another way of expressing it there. Of not hankering after, not desiring what you don't have, what you can't have. What you can't have, and actually more appropriately what you don't have. Qana'a, being content with what you have. So when something is in somebody else's hand, it's out of my heart. And if I want it in my hand, and it's something that person's willing to release from his hand, then I offer the person a trade, whatever the case may be. But if that fails, it's out of my heart. It's not in my hand. Yeah, look, khalu means like emptiness. So it can have the connotation of removing, also emptying your heart of something. So you empty your heart of what your hand is empty of. Why I would like to give that definition is because it's very hard to tell people to also give up the pleasures that you have already. So a good entry point definition is that appreciate what you have. Appreciate what you have. Don't hanker after what everybody else has. What's not in your hand. Yes. Yes, yes. That's why I say the starting point definition of zuhud. Because we don't know. Look, people have zuhud at different levels. And this was apparent from the time of the Sahaba. There was one Sahabi, Abu Dharr, radiallahu anhu, who felt that what you have beyond a day's means, you must give away. And tomorrow's risk will come to you tomorrow. But even the other Sahaba, they couldn't deal with Abu Dharr's standards. Eventually, Uthman radiallahu anhu had to tell Abu Dharr, look, Abu Dharr, you please go live in the outskirts because you're making life too difficult for people. Right? So even they had different understandings of that. And Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, he has a discussion on the specific, like to what level must you have abstinence, to what level must you, when you go beyond that level, are you considered hoarding or, being desirous of the dunya? But the answer he gives is a relative one. And it's dependent on the state of a person. So for some people, having enough, having beyond what will suffice them for a month is hoarding. Like for Abu Dharr, what having beyond a day he considered hoarding. For some people, having beyond what you require for a month is hoarding. For some people, having beyond what you require for a year is hoarding. But generally, like I think was the agreement is if you have beyond what will suffice you for a lifetime, would be hoarding, obviously, unless you're maintaining some wealth for your family after you. But those are different levels. And we can see this in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. There's some ahadith in the Ma'ajim, the Mu'jam Saghir of Tabarani. There's a hadith in which it's mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give his wives the nafaqa of food for a year's provision. But this is now obviously speaking about in the latter part of Nubuwwah, because generally in the earlier parts of Nubuwwah, they were extremely poor, right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would give his wives their provision for a year. But obviously they were ascetic in and of themselves. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was doing, his husbandly duty, but then they had the right to make the tasarruf in that as they pleased, to do with it as they pleased, and they would give it in charity. Most of it, they would give in charity. In fact, they were like Aisha radiallahu anha, she would sit and give the whole day, give. So, but the fact that Rasulullah gave that amount, even though they gave away, shows that it's not wrong for somebody to have that. So zuhud does happen at different levels, and I specifically chose that definition for zuhud because going to somebody and telling them, look here, you must not love the dunya at all, can be very difficult for people to imagine as practicable for themselves. But as a starting point to zuhud, not wanting what you don't have is a good starting point to curtail your nafs. And thereafter, you can look at the unnecessary things that you do have, or rather not unnecessary things, but the things that you could do without. And whether that's distracting you from your journey to Allah or not. For example, you have some furniture, you have an extra set of couches that you're not using. It's in a room, maybe you have a spare lounge. Do you need it? Maybe some people feel the need to have it because of the occasional guest that comes. Maybe some people feel, no, I don't need it. Like the one Sayyid was asked, somebody came to visit him in his house and they asked him, like, where's your furniture? So he told them, where's your furniture? So the guy told him, but I'm a traveler. I don't bring my furniture with me. So the guy told him, but I'm also a traveler. So I mean, people are at different levels of that. So I mean, as a starting point, is that then after that, it's removing from your heart the love even of that which you have. The removing from your heart the love of that which you have doesn't mean you disregard what you have. You must still interact with it with ihsan. So for example, I have a couch. I don't love the couch because it's a dunyawi thing. Like I don't have attachment to it. But at the same time, I recognize it as a favor from Allah. So I treat it with ihsan. I don't let it get broken unnecessarily. I don't deprive the world of its function. Right? Like if it has a function and I'm not making use of that function, perhaps I avail that function to other people. So you still interact with it with ihsan, but you're not attached to it, such that if you lose it, it will alter your state with Allah. So that's, I mean, there's another I can't remember the name of the saint, but a similar thing. I think the story was something about like he was like an extremely pious person who was an ascetic, but then one of the people in the palace, like, they recognized this and they wanted to honor him, so they brought him into the palace, told him to come stay. So he went, and in the palace he was indulging in everything in the palace. And then eventually the guy kicked him out. No, you must be a fake man. You like indulging in all the luxuries there in the palace. What's going on? So then he told him, no, you must leave. But when he told him to leave, I remember this thing correctly now. But when he told him to leave, he asked him, and he left happily, no sadness or anything. The person was also now shocked by that, like the person who owned the palace. And then he said that, no, the reason you thought I was a fake is because you connected abstinence to the absence or presence of material. But that's not what it is. It's that you live with what you have in your hand. So when I was there, these things were available to me, and so I used it, but my heart wasn't attached. And so if you kick me out of the palace, that's also fine with me, because I'm not attached to it. But for you, the kicking out of the palace is a punishment, and the being in the palace is is bliss. That's because you're attached to the palace. But for me, I'm not attached to the palace. So I think that's the general understanding of zuhud. There's another, why I actually came back to the hadith is not because I wanted to speak about zuhud again, or even give that definition. The reason I came back to it is because I wanted to share with you another hadith. And I wanted to share with you hadith. It's not part of this compilation of hadith, but it's a hadith that I feel it's very close to my heart, and I feel that it's extremely important. Because of the hedonistic nature of the pursuit of people in our time. Like, everybody's just pursuing pleasure. But, this hadith just summarizes what we need to be focusing on for me. And the hadith goes something like this. I'm sure I must have mentioned it. There's a hadith like this. I love the hadith a lot. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, من كانت الآخرة همه. Whomsoever the akhirah is his concern. Whomsoever the akhirah is his concern. جمع الله شمله. جمع الله له شمله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gather for him all of his affairs. Let me rather say it that way. Yeah. Rasulullah says that من كانت الدنيا همه. For whomsoever the dunya is his concern. Can everybody hear me? Let me actually pull up the hadith. من كانت الدنيا همه. For whomsoever the dunya is his ham, is his concern. فرق الله عليه شمله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will like scatter his affairs for him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will scatter his affairs for him. Meaning his life will be in disarray. ومن كانت الدنيا همه فرق الله عليه شمله وجعل فقره بين عينيه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place his poverty between his eyes. وَلَمْ يَأْتِهِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَا كُتِبَ لَهُ وَإِلَّا مَا قُدِّرَ لَهُ. and nothing will come to him of the dunya except what has been written for him. Right? Nothing will come to him of the dunya except what has been written for him. وَمَنْ كَانَتِ الْآخِرَةُ هَمَّهُ, whomsoever the akhirah is his concern, جَمَعَ اللَّهُ شَمْلَهُ, or جَمَعَ اللَّهُ لَهُ شَمْلَهُ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will gather his affairs for him. Everything will be in order. وَجَعَلَ غِنَاهُ فِي قَلْبِهِ, and Allah will place his wealth in his heart. وَأَتَتْهُ الدُّنْيَا وَهِيَ رَاغِمَةٌ, and the dunya will come to him despite it. وَأَتَتْهُ الدُّنْيَا وَهِيَ رَاغِمَةٌ, the dunya will come to him even if it doesn't want to come to him. Right? So, مَنْ كَانَتِ الدُّنْيَا هَمَّهُ, whosoever the dunya is his ham, is the thing that busies his heart, is the thing that he focuses on, is the thing that concerns him. His life will be in disarray. His poverty will be between his eyes. What does it mean for his poverty to be placed between his eyes? He cannot see beyond what he doesn't have. Everything, you might have everything in front of him, but he cannot see beyond what he doesn't have. Can't see what he has. وَلَمْ يَأْتِهِ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَا قُدِّرَ لَهُ وَمَا كُتِبَ لَهُ. Nothing will come to him of the dunya except what has been ordained for him. وَمَنْ كَانَتِ الْآخِرَةُ هَمَّهُ, so ever the akhirah is his concern, Allah will gather his affairs for him. All of his affairs will be in order. وَجَعَلَ غِنَاهُ فِي قَلْبِهِ, Allah will place his wealth in his heart. Meaning, he won't see that he doesn't, like he won't feel his lack of material wealth, because his focus will be on what he has. He'll think to himself, he's a millionaire, I'm the richest man in the world. Right? Because of qana'ah, he has a wealthy heart. وَأَتَتْهُ الدُّنْيَا وَهِيَ رَاغِمَةٌ, and the world will come to him even if it doesn't want it. So it's like something we must remind ourselves all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. Because we have choices to make in life. We have choices to make, and the choice oftentimes is between, making more money and doing something beneficial. And it comes to people in different ways, like obviously depending on what your occupation is, what you do in your life, what you're involved in, etc. But I think, it's also an impetus to get involved in good things. And it also shapes how we interact with other people. Shapes how we interact with other people. One of the ways of getting closer to Allah, getting openings with Allah, is through giving of yourself. Like one of the, look, I don't know the stuff in depth. Like I can tell you a little bit of its theory, but it's actually experiential stuff. You might have heard the name Naqshband. But I'm not, like I said, I'm talking about Zuhud. I'm not talking about any like tariqa, whatever. Right? It's a different discussion. But the tariqa of Naqshband, the Naqshbandi tariqa, there is an overwhelming impetus in that tariqa, that to get an opening with Allah, meaning to have your heart opened by Allah, is to make khidmah, is to give of yourself, and to give of what you have also. And I can tell you some crazy stories of like how serious they are about khidmah. Like we were just discussing the other night, myself, Mala Muhammad, and some books that we were reading about it. There's some books about those ulama, awliya as well. But also we're recalling something that Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad spoke about. We're saying, why they actually have that overwhelming focus on khidmah is because the Shaykh of the Tariqah, Shaykh Bahauddin Naqshband, he got his opening through khidmah. So he recommended to other people. And it comes from a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. من كان في الله في عون العبد ما كان العبد في عون أخيه. Allah helps the one who helps his slave. So, they would focus so much on khidmah that you don't focus on who it is you're serving. You don't focus on who the makhdoom is. You only focus on you. I don't know if I must actually say this stuff in public online, but okay, anyways. We know, understand it in context, right? You don't focus on who the makhdoom is. You focus on the khidmah. So it doesn't matter who you're serving, you serve them to the best of your ability. No matter what it is, what, it doesn't matter. You don't focus on who the makhdoom is. The makhdoom is the makhdoom. You focus on the khidmah. So, like you're saying, as Sheikh Bahauddin, his teacher, what his teacher told him to do is, first for 7 years, he just had to fill potholes. There's your khidmah. You want your weird is go fill potholes. Yeah, for 7 years, he had to fill potholes, not outside the roads, whatever. Just teachers in the road and things like that. This is the founder of the Naqshbandi Tariqah. This is how he started. He had to just fill potholes. And then after that, he didn't get the opening yet. So his teacher intensified. He told him, what you must do now is you must serve the stray animals. So, and like I said, you don't focus on who the makhdoom is. You make khidmah to the best of your ability. So all he had to do was, he had to serve the stray animals. And he said, you serve the stray animals to such a degree that if you would see a stray animal coming down a pathway, you would step to the side. So that, the makhdoom can pass by. And they would serve all the animals, sick animals, stray animals, whatever animals are food, serve the stray animals. And then one day he saw a dog with, what's it, mangy or something. How do you say it? Mange, how you say it, whatever. So the dog was like on its back and it was rolling around and scratching itself. And then he looked at the dog with so much pity, he wanted to serve this stray dog. And then he heard like the dog weeping and barking out. And then when he heard the dog barking, then he said, Ameen, Ameen. And then he says that's when he got his first opening. Now, okay, what on earth is happening over there? Allahu A'lam. But the fact is that, he was serving the creation of Allah. Because the hadith also says, Al-Khalqu kulluhum iyalullah. All of the creation are dependents of Allah. And the best of you are those who are most beneficial to his dependents. So yeah, he's serving the stray dog. He saw the dog in despair. He wanted to serve the dog, or he thought that this dog is in such despair, the dog must be calling out to Allah. So he said, Ameen to whatever the dog was saying. And then Allah gave him an opening. And there's many other such like crazy, I don't say crazy stories, but like stuff that's not understood in this context. But it speaks of detachedness from the dunya. How do you spend 7 years, all you're going to go do is go fill potholes? Leave everything else, go fill potholes. Imagine a teacher must tell you that you spend time all the time listening, go fill potholes. And then you must focus your life on serving stray animals. Like to such an extent, you're serving them with so much diligence that you step out of the way for them to pass in the road. But that's how much detachedness they had from the dunya and how much they were willing to do themselves. So that's how they got openings from Allah. May Allah open up for us also. So, I don't know how we got there. But yes, detachedness from the dunya, be willing to not take, but be willing to give. The focus mustn't be on taking. You know, if you're a rich man, and you're extremely wealthy, then generally you don't fear poverty much. You'll be willing to give because it's a little in relation to what you have. Yeah. Subhanallah. Just make me think of Manata, subhanallah. Like he was like that. Yeah. He wouldn't say it, I mean, he wasn't like overtly, but he was like that, subhanallah. I mean, I think there was a time when somebody gave him something like, he didn't have a house. He only acquired a house when he was about 48. And even then, it was like not that he had the money to buy a house. Somebody offered, like when they heard, hey, this guy's still renting. They offered to purchase a house and then he could purchase the house from that person. There were times when people gave him money, like here's a whole deposit for a house. 100,000, few 100,000. Then you'll see, oh, the madrasa needs this. Then he gives all of it to madrasa. There were times one of my colleagues was telling me that, you know, sometimes they would have conferences. Then, you know, they would have a stipend maybe for the speaker. So there's one conference that they had, there was a specific stipend for 1,000 rand for, you know, each speaker for the presentation that they gave. And he did two, so they gave him an envelope with 2,000 rand. So he just put the envelope in his pocket. And then he was driving home and somebody knocked on his window. He didn't know how much money was in it. Somebody knocked on his window, he just gave the guy the envelope. But the guy that was sitting next to him, he was part of the organizing committee, so he knew how much was in there. And he was like thinking to himself, hey, was it too grand? He was like that. It was like, you know, he used to go annually to the book fair in Egypt. There were some people that used to wait there on certain spots in Egypt because they knew, because, you know, around this time, that guy comes here. They don't have an appointment with him, nothing. They just know if that guy comes past, we're going to get something. And in fact, Maulana Muhammad would tell us one day, once, you know, Maulana Riyad Saluji and Maulana Muhammad, they were with Maulana. And so I think the one day they went to the book fair. They were all there, but they used to go every day because the book fair is huge. They go scout all the books. So they would go daily. They went, Manata wasn't with him. And then somebody came to beg from him, but then they told him, like, they gave him something, but then they said, no, like, we're looking for the other guy. Yeah, it was like that. Even like, I can tell you, oh, like I marvel at, I mean, I'm at the madrasa now, and the madrasa's like facilities crazy. But I went to the place where the madrasa started. Yeah. And it's like a house. I know there's two rooms where Manata lived with his family, him and his family. And in the room next to that, students slept over there. And in the other rooms on this side, there were like class and stuff. So basically, there were people passing through. I asked myself, yo, how did he convince his wife to get into this living arrangement? Because this is like some, and the boys lived there. Like 20 boys, you had to feed them, everything. They sent them to school. Like that's just that's Zuhud. That's Zuhud. Yeah. That's not what we were supposed to be talking about, but anyways. So it still exists. And I mean, so much other examples. Even once at the Quds, Malati will give a talk at Quds. So they put the envelope in his pocket. He wasn't even out of the mosque. Somebody told him, no, you know, family's in difficulty. He just put the envelope out, give it to them. I think what would kill me more is not knowing how much is in the envelope. Yeah. I would. But that's, and it's not like it's not like you give and then you sad about how much you gave, or you think you're like amazing because you gave. It's actually like just a nonchalant attitude. Yeah. Money comes, money goes, doesn't faze me. Yeah, its presence and its absence is just, but yeah, Surah An-Nur. Yeah. What time does the class end? At 10 to or at 12 o'clock? At 10 to 12. Yeah. The house is still there. If you ever drive to 40, if you ever drive to 40, you can still see the house. Except the only problem is now I can't give you the exact address. But that's crazy. Yeah. You know whose house it was? Not even this guy, mashallah. Do you know a guy that called him Atarwala? He's a pointy face. Abdul Sattar Mauser. Imam Abdul Sattar Mauser. Yeah, that was his house. He had two houses. Then he heard Malata was teaching somewhere and he thought to himself, no, these guys are wasting this guy. So he told Mullah, okay, take my one house. And like, if you can ever pay me rent, when you can pay rent, when you pay rent. But no, you have to be teaching. So yeah. But that's how when that's the world is filled with a lot of nonsense or something. But it's these small, not small, but these like unnoticed things, acts of altruism, connections with Allah that in my view, that keeps Allah's Rahman everyone. But it's not like stories that we're supposed to hear to just think, oh yeah, that's amazing, that guy is good. But it's there for us to imbibe some of it in ourselves. Like, if you drive past somebody at a robot and you don't give them anything, at least feel sad that you couldn't give them something. Or you couldn't help them. And I think that is part of, like, that's indicative, not to anybody else, because it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, but that's at least indicative of our sidq in relation into Allah, in what we want to do with this. Right? It's an indication of our sidq, which is also part of, one of the most virtuous qualities. Part of our sidq in relation to Allah. Oh Allah, if I had, then I would have given. Or sometimes, even if you do have and you're not willing to give, because maybe the money's on your card or something, then you at least think to yourself, Allah, I didn't do. I could have helped that person. But maybe you see that feeling, maybe that will motivate you to do something else. Maybe it will motivate you to, my money's all on my card and it prevents me from giving. Maybe I must keep some rands on myself so that I can give. And then maybe that action will motivate you to help in a bigger way, a more lasting way. And maybe through that is where you get your opening with Allah. Not every saint needs to have a karamat built over them or anything like that. The door of sainthood is open for everyone. But only if you choose to enter. Allah make us all good. And I think, the important thing is also, sometimes like we always think about it in relation to the other. If you don't have the goal, if you don't have the goal of being a wali of Allah, then like what goal do you have? That's the pursuit of life. You might not ever think it for yourself, but at least you must want it for yourself. So Allah guide us. Is it the same regarding not being able to find work? Give of yourself as much as you want. I'm not sure I understand this question. Not being able to find work. Give of yourself as much as you want. I mean, if it means, if the comment means that, like, if you don't have work, then, and you have the ability, you have free time or time that's not occupied, then should you give of yourself? Certainly, yes, of course. You never know. Oftentimes, it's through doing that service that other doors open up for you. But yeah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us, accept from us. I didn't, so I'm sorry for not getting to Surah An-Nur. Allah will, apportion the time better next week. But I think some of these things are more important than we may imagine. To end there for now. وجزاكم الله خيرا وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله
ورحمة الله
وبركاته.
وبركاته.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.